Welcome to the Freedom Club Podcast, where we discover the fight for freedom, fulfillment, passion, and purpose. Your host is Curt Gallup certified strengths coach, an agency founder who is dedicated to coaching individuals seeking to level up their life and their businesses. The Freedom Club is about unlocking your talents, turning them into strengths, and crushing your objectives. You can learn more at curtmercadante.com. Welcome to the Freedom Club.
Hello, everyone. This is the Freedom Club Podcast. I'm your host, Curt Mercadante. It is Thursday, March 29th, which means it's time for our Thursday interview segment in which I interview a business leader or some other all-around interesting person. And today, my friends, we have just that in Jay Scalzo. Jay and I met last year at our boxing gym, Hurricane Boxing on Folly Road in James Island in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina. You're going to learn more about Jay in today's interview, but you know, Jay had a journey of fulfillment in which he left his 9-to-5 in the corporate world and is now heading up just a wonderful nonprofit called Butterfly Effect. They're raising money to build a community center boxing program in Liberia. Butterfly Effect falls under the parent organization, Save More Kids, headed up by a great individual. I'll tell you, Jay did not have enough wonderful things to say about this man, Kwanai Karmu. He's from Liberia. Both organizations are working in Liberia. Liberia is a country that's on its way up after a brutal civil war that ended in 2006. And so the work they're doing there is so vital. You'll learn all about it in our interview today. But before I get to that interview, I want to highlight a new program I launched this week called Freedom League. If you follow me on LinkedIn, if you've been to my website this week, you've seen the incredible, awesome video that we did on this. Freedom League. It's an online community of individuals dedicated to tapping their superpowers to fight for lives of freedom and fulfillment. Starting May 1st, it's going to be $97 a month. But today, through May 1st, the cost is pay whatever the heck you want. And I mean it. I have people paying $1. I have people paying $97 a month. I have people all in between. It's about building an amazing community of awesome individuals dedicated to tapping their superpowers to fight for lives of freedom and fulfillment. Go to curtmercadante.com today to learn more. I want you on the team. And without further ado, here is my interview with Jay Scalzo of Butterfly Effect. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. And as I mentioned in the introduction, we have Jay Scalzo with the Butterfly Effect. Jay, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you so much for being on the Freedom Club podcast today. Jay and I met, sometime last year. We both attend the same boxing gym, Hurricane Boxing on Folly Road in James Island, Charleston, South Carolina. And I've only been boxing for a few years, but Jay, boxing has been a huge part of your life, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, dated back till probably I was about 10 years old when I picked up the gloves the first time. But then at that time I was far more nimble, so I was into martial arts and taekwondo, and that carried me until that flexibility went away, and then I committed myself back to boxing.
And you grew up Massachusetts, Boston area?
Connecticut, actually, right outside New Haven, Connecticut.
Got
it. So New England by birth. So.
Got it. Yeah, I was thinking Massachusetts because you're a big, huge Rocky Marciano fan. But who's not from Boston? He's from
Brockton.
The
Brockton Bomber. Yes, sir. Matter of fact, we can edit this out if you want, but bam.
Nice.
This is my prized possession right here. So this is a list of everything, every fighter he's ever fought and how they looked after he knocked him out. So however you want to fit that in, you can.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I have to hang it up. It's kind of over there, but I got it at an auction. It's a frame picture of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, the old video game.
Yes.
Which I grew up on, and it's signed by Iron Mike. I got it at an auction. That's
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
And so you mentioned Taekwondo. You went on competitive kickboxing, correct?
Yeah, so I actually spent a few years on the U.S. national team. Tried out where I was on the verge of trying out for the Olympics when they first made it a sport. That was pretty much what I excelled at. You know, when it came to making a choice to pursue Taekwondo or kickboxing or what have you, I actually chose baseball because that was the most practical road to professional sports of some kind, whatever. But I was definitely more motivated from a kickboxing standpoint in my after post-college years, where I did do some competitive stuff, but nothing to a really high level. Once I didn't make the Olympics, I kind of stepped back a little bit. The rules changed, and kickboxing was kind of what I became dedicated to.
Yeah. And you have you've spent your career working in, around, with, for supporting nonprofits, correct?
Yeah. So when I graduated college, I was fortunate enough to meet some individuals that wanted to start a couple nonprofits in this area. So one of them was a education program for the culinary arts. The other was a baseball program for children with disabilities, which led to an opportunity to launch Surfers Healing, which was a autism surf camp or for children with autism. So that's kind of a national organization that you kind of franchise out, and I raised the money to bring them in there. So helping children, especially afflicted with various mental or physical disabilities, has always been a passion of mine. I graduated with a psychology degree, and pursued that even as internships and what have you. But recreational, involving the recreation and the great equalizer being sports, has always been something that has been a nice reprieve from the corporate world that I was dabbling in for quite some time.
Got it. And I want to segue into that, kind of your journey through the corporate world and out of the corporate world, and the main thing we're here to talk about today. But the first question that I think is very appropriate to this discussion, that I always ask my guests, unless I forget, and then it's the second or third question, is, and it's always an interesting thing, because I ask everyone the same question and there's common threads in everyone's answers, but they're all uniquely different. And that question is, what does the word freedom mean to you?
Well, freedom to me, I feel is relative, but as it pertains to me and my journey, it's that ability to pursue individual thought, and it's that ability to pursue it without the need for affirmation of some kind, and that confidence that individual thought is of a productive value. What always was a difficult thing for me in the corporate world was that I for 12 years I was relegated to other people's ideas. I was relegated to a strategy, a training of that somebody else implemented. And as I grew older and felt more confident with my own pursuance, I just fell out of love with that idea. So to me, again, freedom, it may not be defined the same way for other people, but again, it's that ability to pursue opportunity and create my own destiny. That's something that I'm kind of focused on moving forward.
And you mentioned your journey through the corporate world and feeling like there were other people's ideas, that you were trapped within those boundaries. And so I'm sure it was a journey over many years, but you kind of came to that point, right, where it was either jump or don't jump, stay stuck. Yeah. And you decided to jump.
Yeah, I did. My wonderful, supportive girlfriend, Tori, her and I would always joke that there are never any movies or motivational speeches that exist that the narrative is, stay status quo. Everything's fine. Just do what you're doing. It's always that emphasis on taking chance, taking risks, and that analogous leap that where you're inevitably going to fall and you're inevitably going to scrape your knees, but the idea is getting back up and staying consistent with that path, and that's what I ultimately tried to do, or I ultimately decided to do this past month, and had multiple plans prior that led me to this point. So yeah.
It's interesting, that taking that leap can be scary. And I use the term trapped in a comfort zone of misery, because so many people are trapped for so many years, but they'd rather be miserable than take that leap into the unknown, because it's scary. And I totally understand that. And a lot of times they'll say next week, next month, next year, and they keep putting it off. And so they're 65 years old and their kids are grown and they're sick, their spouse is sick or something. And then they have regrets. And so kudos to you for
there was a quote that I heard. Yeah, there was a quote that I heard by, of all people, Jim Carrey during a commencement speech. And what he said that resonated with me most was that too many people walk this world disguising fear with practicality. And I have responsibilities like anybody else. You know, I have a 4-year-old. I have a family. You know, I have a mortgage. I have all the stuff. And the idea of losing that comfort was terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying until, you know, you take his speech a little bit further. You realize that, you know, you could fail doing a lot of things that you don't like doing. So you might as well fail doing something, or putting yourself in a position to fail doing something that you absolutely love. And I've found that now with some of the passions that I've had, and you know, it's more practical than ever, I think, ultimately.
That's an excellent quote. Excellent story, because you know, I'll talk to people who are in 9-to-5s, and in this economy, in this day and age, there's no, you know, it used to be if you were in your 9-to-5, you were there for 25 years, unless you really screwed up, you know. Right. These days, the economy the way it is and things the way it is, there's no certainty in any single job. So like you said, wouldn't you rather fail doing something you like to do? And people won't admit it, but, or it's hard to admit it, that, you know, there's time and money. Money is actually a renewable resource, whether you think so or not. It can be hard to claw back, but it's still a renewable resource. Time is not. And no matter how hard you climb, no matter how lucky you get, or whatever, how many breaks you get, time is going to pass you by no matter what. So,
yeah. And it's in a linear time, as we know it is linear. There's a start and there's a finish. There's a beginning and there's an end. If you want to augment that in any way you can, it is the most valuable thing that you have that you will not have tomorrow, or you'll be running low on. And that's what, you know, whether it be spending time with my daughter or my family or my father or my brothers or my career, it is time that is my most valuable asset. And I spent too many years worrying about the start and finish that had been delegated to me by somebody else. Right. The beginning and the end, the goals, the arbitrary quotas, this rat race that I was in that ultimately was decided by somebody else. And going back to that individual thought, you know, my individual thought didn't matter. I was seeking the affirmation of somebody who, you know, again, was just delegating somebody else's idea. And that's what I had the hardest time with. So
you take the leap, and right now you're doing something that's very special that you're running, that's kind of being headquartered or run out of Hurricane Boxing, which is the Butterfly Effect. Why don't you tell us what that's all about?
Yeah. So in my previous life, I was, again, with all my experience in nonprofits, fundraising was something that I've always been passionate about. And I was asked by an organization called Save More Kids to help identify ways to bring in new funding. Their mission was to rehabilitate the country of Liberia after decades of turmoil, whether it be civil war or there was an Ebola crisis. Like most countries in Africa, there was an AIDS epidemic. You know, there was some infrastructure components to it that have been since resolved, and they needed some help, you know, rehabilitating some aspects of it. So what I had since I was 14 years old was an idea one day of teaching boxing to children in third world countries. I got that idea from the Rumble in the Jungle and Muhammad Ali's emerging himself in the people of Zaire. And I can talk for hours and, you know, upon days about the impact that had. So I just randomly brought that up to the people of Save More Kids, and they said, let's do it in Liberia. So for the past 6 months or so, we've been organizing a team of both very talented, both amateur and professional boxers to come together to provide a boxing school, or to create a boxing school in Gamba City, Liberia, with the help of Save More Kids as their 6th initiative of this big, giant impact project. We are now going to associate the boxing program with their educational program and start to measure the impact that the discipline and determination and that self-confidence that boxing gives people to how they perform in school and how they perform in life, and the opportunities that they have the courage now to pursue and access, which, you know, has otherwise been again, relegated to this cycle of dependency. They're used to getting stuff and relying on other things to feed them. Whereas, you teach a man to fish, you can feed an entire village. So that's the idea.
And a lot of people probably aren't realize or aware of the history of Liberia, where the name Liberia comes from, and not only its connection to the United States, but especially here in our home city of Charleston, South Carolina.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the country of Liberia, named after the word liberty, was founded by emancipated slaves. They jumped on a boat. A large majority of them came from the city that we call home, Charleston, South Carolina. And when they discovered Liberia, they named it after, again, liberty. And the cities all up and down the coast are named after, Monrovia, James Monroe, Marshall, the Marshall Plan. There's plenty of other examples of the impact that the United States had on the development of this country. And you even follow the history of its evolution, it's eerily similar, both good and bad, to the evolution of our country, whether it be displacing the native indigent population and putting, reassigning them to certain areas and using the influence of the United States as a way of building a quote unquote democracy for a period of time, only to lead to even more of a rebellion when it came to the Civil Wars a couple hundred years later.
And that wasn't the latest the Civil War that is still kind of left the country, even though they're on their way back. There are still people who are with the scars, mental and physical, of that. How long ago was that? 20 years ago? 10 years ago?
Yeah, so a little less than 15. So the Civil War officially ended in 2006.
Okay.
I believe, give or take a few. And there is a gentleman is a loose term, but he was Charles Taylor. He fueled this rebellion, and it got as gruesome as you can imagine, from child soldiers to just genocide. The whole country was out of power except for his little compound. He really gutted the culture of that company. And, you can argue a lot of the politics behind it, but it ultimately was with the intent of building an infrastructure that he felt was more like the United States versus the Samuel Doe, who was the president in charge at the time, who he thought was more. So they both were trying to emulate our country, but in their own narrative and their own context. So that's what caused this gigantic upheaval, and a lot of people were killed. I think 250,000 were killed. Over the 10-year span, and 800,000 refugees displaced throughout the country. The executive director of Save More Kids was somebody who was a refugee, and he walked over 250 miles for 2 years until he was able to identify. And that was when he was maybe 10 or 11.
Wow.
That's a life that nobody could imagine living if they were born and raised in our country. It's just a remarkable feat that he was able to overcome. And
to this day, watching the Save More Kids movie at the fundraiser, they still have light years to go in terms of basic health needs, poverty, education, et cetera, which is where Butterfly Effect comes in and building this community center. It's interesting because as you've gone through this process, you've kind of discovered and linked up and helped others discover some Liberian boxers who've befriended each other and created a sense of community amongst themselves. I think you just visited a number of them in London, right?
Yeah, I did. The impact that you can have if you really put 100% of your time into something is pretty interesting if you're committed to it. And what is which is a number that is often thrown out there, is 70% of the population of the country is under the age of 25. That's 3.2 million people, give or take. For various reasons, as a victim, the countless victims of the Civil War, if you were able to remove yourself from that environment, seldom did you have a need to go back, right? And when I reached out to a handful of professional fighters, there were two most notably that responded almost immediately. One is an active fighter by the name of Freddie Kuwait, and he was born in Liberia and left to move to Germany at the very young age. So he was able to avoid some of the turmoil, not all of it, but some of the turmoil associated with the Civil War. And the other was a gentleman by the name of Lee-Manuel Osei, who was a heavyweight fighter. He's about 50 years old, heavyweight, cruiserweight fighter. But he left in the 90s just to pursue a professional career. And when he was gone, the war hit. And his family was decimated as a result. And he has never gone back. So when, not only did he leave boxing in general after a very notable career, he left it just to pursue his faith in God and pursue a church that he followed. The timing of bringing these two together could not have been more valuable to each other, those individuals, to where Lee-Manuel jumped on a plane and met Freddie in London and has been training him ever since. And that was through a casual email introduction that I made to two of them, and from an ocean away, and having the opportunity to meet them in person together and seeing this camaraderie that has been developed. It's benefited not just the two of them at the time they needed it the most, but it's validated that there's a higher power that and there's a ultimate purpose of bringing this entire team together. And there's quite a few people that are going to be benefiting from this from the within Liberia, but just personally, the impact that we've been able to bring just as a handful of individuals has been quite remarkable.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Let us know where you're at. Where are you at right now? I think there's a few different phases, as you were saying before we hopped on this call. The mission has expanded a little bit. So let us know where you at in it and where you going.
Yeah, so we started with the intent of teaching boxing to the Christ Children's Home in Gamba City, Liberia, and that was an orphanage that's essentially owned by Save More Kids, the organization I referenced earlier. As the program expanded and some of the story kind of leaked out to more of the professional boxing community, there has been quite a bit of uptake, and there's a company, I'm sporting their gear now, Box Raw.
Nice.
They're based out of the UK, and they're an emerging boxing apparel company. They heard about what we were doing. They reached out through some very circuitous stories and introductions and what have you, where when we were in London, I brought the team to meet with the CEO, and together we've developed an organization called Boxing is Love. And we feel that the impact that boxing has on an individual when it comes to the implementation of self-discipline, determination, perseverance, those characteristics that are imperative to again pursue that opportunity and kind of overcome their circumstance. There's some synergy throughout the entire world, and as Box Raw has been so gracious to provide all the equipment and the marketing, the international marketing to grow the butterfly effect component of Save More Kids, they have now agreed to expand the program worldwide with plans to go to Ghana and Cuba and Haiti and Guatemala, Bolivia. They have a stable of professional fighters that have been looking to do something along those lines, and they just didn't have the infrastructure or the plan essentially to execute it. And I feel that we've created a replicable plan and concept that they also agreed upon. So we've begun the process of scaling Boxing is Love as our foundation and moving forward independently. Whereas Butterfly Effect is going to remain part of Save More Kids with the content or with the concept of sustainability and building a community center. But again, the replicable nature of it to go to other areas is only going to help more and more people. So what started as a 44-person or 44-child endeavor with the hopes of a couple hundred could expand to thousands across the world. And that's what's really exciting.
That's awesome. And how's the fundraising going for the program?
Yeah, so we have a commitment to Save More Kids to raise about $40,000 in order to fund the entire team and the marketing component. and we're about halfway there. We have a couple events that are still pending, and some donor meetings that we still have, pending. But overall, I think we're trending in the right direction. But support is always needed. You can go to the Save More Kids website and look for Butterfly Effect to donate directly to the program. So restricted funds goes directly to the boxing program. But ultimately, there's never going to be enough resources for us to tap into to help more and more children along the way. Liberia is very important to me because of the relationship I built with these individuals in the very beginning. And it's imperative that we execute this as flawlessly as possible, and scaling it to as big of a production and big as an opportunity. To again go back to changing the narrative of that country. I'm kind of sick of the African perception being the little black kid with a fly in his face and distended belly. That's what we've been kind of conditioned to consume over these years. But it's not that anymore. Like I said, it's one of the more stable environments. Ghana was the fastest growing economy in the world last year. Wow. Liberia is doing wonders when it comes to changing the output of your GDP and natural resources. And it's only a matter of time before the continent again changes its narrative, and we want to be there to help.
Have there been, I assume out of that you're halfway to the goal, I assume there's some companies, corporations that have stepped up to help thus far?
Yeah. So Box Raw again is one big corporate sponsor that we've been fortunate enough to work with, again, through some of the relationships with the gym. We've met with individuals from Bear Paint, some of the larger corporations, to a company that is going to help provide software to kind of measure our output. We're still, validating all the partnership agreements and all that stuff, what we can't say, and all that arbitrary legal stuff. But everyone's been very receptive to helping and continuing to fund this journey. We can't do it without the people that are obviously supporting us. So
that's excellent. Yeah. So final question is a non-butterfly effect related question. It's more about boxing overall.
Yeah.
What do you think? I mean, even you talk about Ali, the Rumble in the Jungle. You talk about some of those great heavyweights over a span of 40 years, 50 years. Even when I was growing up, you were growing up, we had Mike Tyson, Evander, they were all going at it. What's it going to take for boxing to get back to where listen, there's some great fights that come up, but in many cases, except for Mayweather-McGregor, which wasn't a real boxing match, what's it going to take for boxing to recapture the American imagination again, like it did even 20 years ago?
It's a great question. Yeah. So I think, regardless of the talent that are in all the divisions, the draw is a heavyweight, right? It's the Tysons, it's the Alis, it's Evander Holyfield, Riddick Bowe, it's those types of things. And I think, the storylines of boxing have been growing, and more people are coming back to it. But it's going to take an international fight between two banger heavyweights with a knockout ratio that's super high, and that from different parts of the world to really bring it together. And I think we're really on that trend right now with this. Say what you want about skill set, but Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder are on a collision course together. And you probably didn't bring this up intentionally, but our plan from Box Raw and our vision is to bring international fights to international locations. We want to displace Wembley Stadium, we want to displace Vegas, and we want to recreate the Rumble in the Jungle. And quite honestly, whether you meant to do this or not, we have plans to build an event of a large capacity and actually execute it in Africa. But I digress a little bit, but those two, I think, are the individuals that will capture the hearts of America, once again, because again, it's Deontay Wilder who's 40-0, and it's Anthony Joshua who's 30-0, and they all have like 95% knockout rate. So if we can get an 8 to 10 round fight of just slugfest, people are going to start to return to the ring. For a long time after Evander and after Tyson, the best fighters on the planet were the smaller guys. So the De La Hoyas and the Mayweathers, and they kind of controlled this unanimous decision trend that kind of bored people, I think, for a little while. The big slugfests weren't really there, but I think that's changing. And boxing, it's affected a lot of people. It's emerging. There's an international following outside the United States that's just getting bigger and bigger. So
I'll pay to watch Coach Mike come out of retirement and fight.
Yeah, he still thinks he can beat Mayweather. So let's see if that's true or not.
And for those listening, it's Coach, the head of Hurricane Boxing, Mike Galimas, who's in the South Carolina Hall of Fame, 100 and something, 200 and something. Yeah.
250 career wins in the amateur level. And he's not only that, but he's impacted so many people along the way, myself included. I turned to Hurricane Boxing at a time where I needed it the most, and I got exactly what I needed out of it, and that was that inner drive again to reestablish myself in the sport. And he's a huge part of how far we've come with Butterfly Effect. So is the other members of the team. I mean, you see firsthand what they're doing with the kids program now. It's programs like that, and it's gyms like Hurricane Boxing around the country and really around the world that manifest this feeling of purpose when it comes to boxing. And that's where, like anything else, that groundswell's got to maintain, and it's going to grow again.
Yeah, that's we have 4 kids. 2 of them are in the kids program, and it's, I guess now 2 years, maybe 2.5 years that I've been going there, and my kids started 5 days later doing the kids program, and it's just such a huge part. It's replaced a lot of the traditional team sports for us, and they just love it twice a week. So
I think it does provide a team concept. It's not baseball, it's not football, but because of that inclusionary concept that they have with the kids program there, and in most, it keeps a lot of kids out of trouble, and it gives them again the confidence to pursue that next step. And when I was growing up, again, I played baseball, and I even played baseball in college for a little bit. When I was in a slump during baseball, I would always go back to the boxing gym or the Taekwondo studio to get my confidence back, because it's a head game. And that was just one of those things that it was always a reprieve for me, sense of refuge, if you will. So.
And there's a sense of discipline, and also it's obviously boxing, is at least for me 98% head and about 2% body. Although I do get worn out, but and a lot of it I think is Coach Mike, but a sense of discipline, a sense of manners. Yes, coach, no coach, no parents are allowed in the gym. And having coached soccer before, I will tell you that the reason I don't coach soccer anymore is because of the parents. And there's a sense of entitlement, a sense of coaching from the sidelines that you just don't see in boxing, which just to me is one reason that it's replaced a lot of those other sports. So,
and I think that's a very valid point. And going back to Butterfly Effect and going back to what or our sense of purpose, it's illogical to think that every kid who laces up these gloves are going to be, or bang on the bag, are going to be the next heavyweight champ. It's absolutely logical. What it's doing is, to your point, is it's instilling this sense of purpose and this drive that if opportunity does present itself, they're not going to be afraid to pursue it. And in our country, that sounds, almost short-sighted, because it never really seems to be an issue. But across the world, it's that fear, that cycle of dependency. It's that ability to overcome circumstances that I feel personally boxing has given me. And I think there is ubiquity to that when it comes to the children of our in the third world that have been forgotten for most of our lives, I guess. So
that's excellent. So Jay, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thanks for all the work you're doing with Butterfly Effect. You said it before earlier in the podcast, but say it again. People want to support it, learn more about it. where can they go online?
Yeah, so you can go to savemorekids.org and look for Butterfly Effect, www.savemorekids.org. You can visit our Butterfly Effect Boxing Facebook page. Contributions can be made directly to either the website or the Facebook page. But again, if you see, it really comes down to awareness. So if you see it, share it. If you like it, share it to your friends. Tell everyone you can, because we're not interested in doing anything other than creating a global phenomenon with what we're doing. So go to the Box Raw website, check out their gear. They got some great stuff. Check out their blog. There's going to be a story about the program coming out this week. There was already a story about the meeting that we referenced earlier between Freddie Manuel. They're building quite a bit of that groundswell for us, and they're giving us that sense of credibility that we lacked in the very beginning, that I think has changed. So it'd be great to have every support we can.
Awesome. And we'll put all those links in the show notes, blog posts, etc. Jay, great. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, sir.
Thank you very much.
Weekend.
You
Take
too.
care. See ya. All right.